Hello, in this Icarus mission we were tasked with getting into the desert biome. To do that we needed to pick up some drilling equipment, go to a cave that had a tunnel system through it that led to the desert biome, and breaking through a series of rocks, and then we'd be able to get to the desert, explore a little bit, and then leave. First things first, as always, I wanted to hop out and start picking up some equipment, because at this point I still don't have any tools that I can bring with me. I have to make everything every time we land. So while I'm collecting rocks and little bits of oxide to give me oxygen and stuff like that, I can see Name Gear and Arrow are coming down to the planet to come and help. So as always, all three of us are going to be on this mission, all three of us are going to be working together to try and complete it. There's a beautiful moment here that reminds me of when the Falcon Super Heavy launched and its two boosters landed at the same time. It was so cool to see, and this looks a little bit like that. We had quite a long way to go just to pick up the mining equipment, so we decided just to gather things on our way to get to that box. Always good to pick up pumpkins when you can, and it's always good to get a little bit of meat on the way, and I need the target practice because I feel like I'm always kind of rusty when we start a new mission. The trip there wasn't too eventful. I was getting some oxide every now and then, and weirdly found some pumpkins growing in this oxide rock that was a little bit weird. But mostly it was just walking and then occasionally pulling off an absolutely cracking shot. At one point we found more corn than I think I've ever seen in this game, so it actually took quite a long time just to try and gather it all. And I was super happy when I realised that you can just hold the interact button rather than having to keep on tapping it over and over again. And then just kind of wandering around in the corn picks up absolutely loads of it. And eventually we made our way over to the storage crate that had been dropped for us. Now these things always have mission critical equipment that you need for that particular mission. So in this case we got a tunneling drill that we were going to be using to mine our way through the tunnel. With that done, we now had to go on to the next objective, which was going to be another storage crate to pick up the next piece of equipment we needed. Again, this was quite an uneventful long walk. There was a little bit of shooting some wolves that were trying to attack us, but at this point these aren't really much of a threat. We can kill them with a couple of arrows, or just using our knife. If you hit them in the head, they go down super quickly. Earlier in the mission, I'd been bragging that I didn't get a single infection last time we played this, and this time we got to this beautiful lake, topped up the water, and of course I got a bacterial infection straight away. So these kind of things can be treated with antibiotics, but we don't have any kind of base or any crafting benches or a mortar and pestle or anything to do that, so I kind of just have to deal with it at this point. But that was quite a nice shot. Eventually we made it to the second supply crate. Now this one had inside it a way of powering the drill. We had a solar panel and we had some electricity wire. And now this was something that was way simpler than we expected. At the time we thought this was going to be really complicated to set up and we were going to have like real problems trying to get through this cave. And we maybe went a little bit overboard with our preparations. So we wandered over to where the cave entrance was and found that it was this really beautiful idyllic little spot where you had a pool of water, which was obviously good, having a nice water supply next to us, as well as being enclosed on loads of sides so there weren't going to be too many wild animal attacks or anything like that, and we decided this was probably a good place to set up a base. So I immediately got to getting all of the materials that we were going to need to set up a base. Our thinking was that we were going to have this base of operations while we were mining our way through the tunnels, and we'd probably need somewhere to sleep when it got dark, and we'd need somewhere where we could prepare food and weapons and armor and things like that. After killing a bit of the local wildlife, the base was coming together quite nicely, but there was some rain starting, a bit of a storm. Now you end up getting some quite bad stat debuffs if you're exposed in a storm, so I needed to get this base set up as quickly as possible. I'd made it a little bit bigger than the usual bases we were making, because we found previously that we were really struggling to get a lot of the crafting benches and stuff like that inside, and unlike other games where you can just put them outside, loads of things in Icarus need shelter for them to work. By now it was starting to get dark and I still hadn't finished hardly any of the base. I didn't have any walls up or anything. Decided to make a fire pit so we could cook some food a little bit quicker and provide a little bit of warmth and light so we could carry on working into the night. With some more frantic nighttime wood cutting, the base was pretty much done. I decided to add a ladder onto the side of the base because I thought if we're getting attacked by things, it might make sense to be a little bit higher up so we can kind of hide up there where maybe the AI can't get to us. That ended up not being too much of a factor really, but I think it's a good idea that I'm going to use in future bases. So while Namegear was trying to finish off the last sleeping bags because he'd killed a lot of animals and had all of the leather and stuff like that, I was just out trying to pick up a few more resources to craft a few things. Once we had all 3 sleeping bags done, then all players can go to sleep in the sleeping bags, and that moves time on to 7 AM the next morning. So we'd have a little bit of light and we could start mining the cave. Even though it was morning, it's still pretty dark, and I decided to build a load of floor torches because it was going to stay being dark in the cave, obviously. It's a cave. Normally when we go into caves, we end up having to fight these horrible little worm type things that jump out and spit poison at you. So we were kind of a bit nervous of that. So I'd built a bunch of floor torches, and the idea was I'd keep on going through, putting more and more floor torches, and if a worm popped out, I could immediately back off, get the bow and arrow out, and then start shooting them. It's really hard to plant these floor torches in the dark, like super difficult to see where they are after you've put them down, so you can go and put twigs in them to light them. Eventually, I'd run out of sulfur, so I couldn't make any more floor torches, but we decided to mine some of the iron that was in the cave, thinking that we could make iron knives and things like that. Iron's obviously super useful in the game, and Namegear was higher level and started unlocking lots of different things, so wanted to be able to build some of those things in this mission. Heading back out to the base, because we didn't have any more light in the cave, I was mining some rock so I could make a furnace, because with a furnace we'd be able to smelt that iron and then use it to make tools and things. As I said earlier, putting a furnace outside doesn't work. It said it required shelter, so I had to just casually pick up this massive stone furnace and move it inside the base so that we could use it to start smelting some of that iron and the copper that we'd been finding. Arrow managed to find a bunch of sulfur deposits, so that meant we could head back into the cave. I had more floor torches, so I could start putting them down. Now the cave was really interesting. It had kind of watery bits that meant we couldn't put stuff on, and for some reason some of the slopes wouldn't let me build the torches. Before long, we found the first rock face that we had to tunnel through. So I could put the tunneling device, it just kind of attached to the side like that, and then it needed power. So we needed to use the cable to go and run it all the way back outside so I could use that solar panel thing to power it. Running the cables is actually super easy in this game. I really liked it. It's just a matter of kind of dragging it to a point. There's a certain maximum length for a wire, and then you attach it onto some kind of anchor point. And then once you've done that, you can then connect that onto another piece and so on, and daisy chain all the way out of the cave. So getting outside of the cave, I could then put down those solar panels. It seemed like there was a lot of light down here, even though we had mountains on like 3 different sides of us, so I didn't think that was going to be too much of a problem. And then it was just a matter of wiring that up to the drill. Now, progress on mining through it, because it just kind of activated as soon as we did that, was super quick and way faster than we realised. That meant that we had kind of wasted a lot of time by making a base, because we were going to get through this tunnel without too much trouble. The game did throw a bit of a spanner in the works when each of the tunnels is kind of collapsed. When you've gone through each one, it spawns a couple of enemies. Nothing too scary, but we had a hyena in the cave, so we're starting to get some of the desert animals. Luckily, these things are just like wolves basically. You can shoot them in the face with 1 arrow and they'll probably be fine. Unfortunately, it had also spawned some of these horrible tunnel snakes that I really despise. They're quite easy to fight, they're just kind of 3 arrows to the face, but the problem is that they poison you if they hit you. So 1 hit will poison you, and then that will last for a surprising amount of time, causing lots of damage. After dealing with all the enemies, we then progressed through the tunnel and could find the second blockage that we had to put the tunneling thing on. Then it was just a case of wiring it up back to the wires that we had left for the previous one. There was a pool of water to kind of navigate around, but that didn't really matter. It just kind of made you cold if you went in it, but that wasn't too much of an issue at this point. But once we'd connected up all the wires, then the tunneling drill could start working again, and it was just exactly the same thing. We just had to wait a little bit for it to finish. While it was tunneling away, I went back to the base to just like top up on oxygen and things like that, and also check the furnace and pick up some of the iron. We'd made a bunch of iron from this. You actually need 40 iron just to make an anvil, which then lets you start making metal tools and things like that. So you have to smelt a bunch of iron before you can even start making anything useful. With the anvil made, I could then start making things like metal tools and stuff like that. The first thing I always make is an iron knife. That's just because it lets you skin things much more effectively, and it's pretty good in a fight, especially somewhere like the cave where your bow isn't going to be quite as useful, because you're always going to be up close to the things that you're fighting. The route to the desert was open, but we still had a few problems in the base to take care of. Namely, that wolves kept running in to attack Name Gear while he was in the base. Like I said, they're easy to take care of, but quite a lot of them had managed to get in. Now at this point, all we needed to do was go through to the desert, and we'd never been there before, so we didn't really know what it was going to be like. So we spent a little bit of time preparing, trying to make sure that everybody had metal tools in case we needed to fight a load of things, making sure that we were stocked up on things like oxygen and water and food, just so through our journey into the desert we'd be okay. We decided to sleep one more time because we figured going into the desert at night might make it a little bit more difficult if we were getting attacked or anything like that, so we waited until the next morning to set off on our grand journey. Heading through the caves with only a torch to light our way, we were a little bit apprehensive about what to expect. We didn't know what we were going to be asked to do in the desert, we didn't know what enemies were going to be waiting for us, we didn't know how harsh it was going to be just surviving the desert environment. We had no real idea what was waiting for us on the other side. So we headed out there with a torch, we were loaded up, we had oxygen, we had water, we had arrows, all of that kind of stuff. And it was quite spectacular when we saw the desert for the first time. The biomes in this really do look very, very different. And then when we headed out there, we could see there were some hyenas and cougars and stuff. But also, when we headed out there, the mission objective changed and it was immediately just return to the dropship. We were done. So it turned out all we really had to do was go and see the desert, and that was it. This was an insanely easy mission. We didn't need to make a base for this at all. We would have been able to do it all in one day pretty much. I mean, there was a lot of walking at the beginning, but other than that, it was super simple. Since we were out in the desert, we decided to spend a little bit of time just doing some target practice because it is quite nice without the grass and the trees. You can see for miles and get lots of shots on faraway animals. So with that hunting out of our system, we decided to head back to the dropship. So this obviously meant going the whole way back that we had come through. So we had to go back through the cave, past the base, and then all the way back across the forest to the dropships. When we got back to the base, because Namego had just unlocked it, he decided that he really wanted to make a machining bench. He wanted to make some of the things that he'd just unlocked. So we kind of hung around a little bit longer while he did that. Eventually it was time to set off for that long walk all the way back down. This meant going through pretty much the entirety of the first biome, so this was going to be a really long walk. We were fairly stocked up, like we had enough stuff, but to be honest, surviving in the forest is pretty easy and you can find most things that you need along the way. It did start raining on the way back, there was a little bit of a storm, but it wasn't that bad and exposure wasn't too much of a problem when we were just going to be running back, so we just powered on through it. Finally, I was in sight of the dropships. Now, I was a little bit further ahead of the others, so I had to wait for them for a bit, and I decided to carry on our tradition of starting a fire just as we left. Normally, we'd burn the base down that we'd spent so long working on, because the server just closes once you all leave. But since our base was so far away, I decided to just try and start a fire near these trees that were a little bit closer. The others caught up and headed to their dropships just as my fire started spreading a little bit out of control, but this was fine because we were just going to leave anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. With both of them gone, it was my turn to get into the dropship and leave. At this point, none of the things that I had found during the mission could be taken with me, so all we had to do was leave the planet and then this mission was completed. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more Icarus videos. I absolutely love playing this game, I love streaming this game, and I'm really enjoying making these videos. So let me know if you want to see more of them, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.